welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and joining us today is a special guest, Kadia Blagrove. Kadia is a New York-based writer and producer. Her work has been published in the Huffington Post, Complex, and Jezebel. She is the creator of the web series Leah the Late Bloomer, which I personally had the joy of working on. Kadia, thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
Hey guys,
welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're excited to have a new official member of the cult here, so...
This is the fifth installment in our series 80s Indies. Today we'll be discussing the very first Spike Lee joint, 1986's She's Gotta Have It.
I want you to know the only reason I'm consenting to this is because I wish to clear my name. Not that I care what people think, but enough is enough. And if in the end it helps some other people out, well then that's fine too. I consider myself normal, whatever that means. Some people call me a freak. I hate that word. I don't believe in it. Better yet, I don't believe in labels. But what are you gonna do? This was the deal.
She's Gotta Have It follows a young woman, Nola Darling, who is seeing three different men and trying to decide which one she might like to be with, while also exploring her own sexuality and position in the world.
Yes, and Spike Lee joint, and our very first that we've talked about here, and his first feature-length film. And it earned a lot of positive reviews, and it essentially launched his career. He had done, I think, a short before that had gotten some notoriety, but this is his first feature-length film. And of course, he would go on to do School Days and Do the Right Thing, and from there, just kind of shot off to be one of the, in my opinion, one of the all-time great directors out there, still working today and still making great films. I had seen this film a while ago, so I rewatched it to talk about it, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it even more than I had remembered, especially for a first effort. I thought it was very, very confident movie, very unique and sort of experimental in some ways. Just very fresh and new. You could tell, watching other movies from that time, there was just something different. But Kadia, I want to talk to you about it and then get your thoughts, opinions. Is this the first time you've seen it for the show, or?
No, I've watched it. I watched it because when the TV show version came out, I was like, oh wait, this is based on a film, so I
the Netflix
went back.
Show.
Yeah, I was very surprised at how progressive it was at that time. Just like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Women having sex just because they want to. Oh my gosh. It was really cool.
Wow.
It was definitely something.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I wouldn't expect to come out, before I was born. So.
Yeah, 1986 this film came out. Jeremy, had you seen this film before?
I saw this film a couple years ago for the first time.
Okay.
And like a lot of the films we've talked about on this podcast, this is a super low budget film. I think the total budget I'm seeing here is $175,000, which in 1986
it was certainly
doesn't
an indie.
Go as far. Yeah, certainly indie, but it doesn't go as far as it would today because you got to think the whole film is shot on film. So you immediately take a good chunk of that, and it all goes straight to lab processing fees and sound mixing, and so pretty low budget, pretty ragtag effort. And I love the creative solutions in this film. Just as a filmmaker,
definitely
the pure simplicity. Obviously, the black and white, which I'm sure we'll get into, is really rich because you see a lot of these kind of low budget indie films that are in black and white. Mm-hmm. And this one, what stood out to me was how well they used black and white. It felt like there were conscious decisions being made. Thinking about the fact that it was a black and white film, it wasn't just a film that happened to be in black and white. Mm-hmm. This one was really exciting the first time I saw it for me, and watching it again today, there were things that I didn't even notice the first time that
definitely
were
or things
really,
I forgot
really
about that really stood out this time when I watched it, including those snapshots you talked about, Jeremy, like the photographs, which is something that Spike Lee kind of uses over and over in the film, not too much, but just kind of is sprinkled throughout. I noticed the film opens with snapshots along with the credits, and they're in black and white, and some of them are young children playing in the city, or it's mixed with older men and women, and really I just saw that as like snapshots of the city at that time, I guess, when they filmed it.
Also, like those photos were taken by his brother.
Oh, were they? Okay. Great.
Yeah, which also goes into like the whole like low budget of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
dad did the music. His sister was like the actress, and yeah. But yeah, I totally love those pictures too because it really captures like
Yeah.
Brooklyn, and that's what really probably like made him Spike Lee because like
Yeah.
everything about him is like authentic,
Right. Definitely.
unfiltered.
Did his brother take the photos for the film, like, or was it something that was unrelated? Do you
I'm
know?
not sure.
Okay.
I have a feeling it could have been for the film, or I mean, I don't know. I feel like he just reps Brooklyn so hard.
Yeah.
It could have just been like photos he
Yeah,
had.
definitely.
Even just through the photos, but I mean, so the place where the film takes place primarily is in the Fort Greene neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I've spent a lot of time over there, and I just it is such a kind of community, especially around that park during the summertime. You'll see, and there are just so many people just there, just meeting up with their friends, like cooking food, and through the winter, obviously it gets a little colder out, but it's still just a very central meeting place. And I know like the neighborhood has changed. It's a very different place now than it was in the 1980s. But even so, it still has some of that real kind of community vibe, and I think that it's interesting that it's a movie where like these characters are so in each other's lives, even though especially the men don't really like each other. But they're still like, it's like they're all living in the same neighborhood and constantly in contact with each other, which I think creates this really interesting conflict because it's not like this intense hatred and like this is really brutal conflict. It's just kind of like these guys are around each other. They already know who each other are.
Yeah.
And
They're
they
just
kind
sitting
of
on a
have
bench
this like
together in the park,
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that though. Yeah, it's very authentic. It's very. I thought it was a great way to open the film and kind of bring you into that world and to show you like kind of how Spike sees it. His city and the city is sort of like a character in the movie, I think too. So it was a good way to start it, and from there, we are introduced to Nola Darling, who is our main character and the character that everyone's talking about in the movie, pretty much. She is the she from the title. And she wakes up and speaks directly to the camera, which is a stylistic technique, another stylistic technique which is used throughout the film, and something that I think is another, just gives it like a kind of an energy, and you really get the personalities of the characters that way, just in a really quick way, just having them speak to the camera like that and hearing their thoughts and things like that. I think it's more interesting to me than standard like narration or voiceover. It's just different. I thought it was kind of a cool way to do it. But did you both like that sort of like technique he used?
I think so too because it's intimate and it's about intimacy,
right,
or lack thereof.
Exactly.
And I think that was a very clever way for him to introduce us to Nola because I mean it's already pretty interesting for like a man to tell this story as well, like, and for his first film to be that, like,
it is interesting. You're right.
Yeah, so I think to have it open with Nola kind of introducing herself and not necessarily like just a story told about her,
and she's pretty much saying to us in that scene that like people are going to be talking about me in this movie.
Yeah.
And they do. Everyone has their opinion on Nola. And we don't really hear from her too much directly like that until the end of the film, I believe. There might be maybe one other scene in between, but I think it's pretty much the beginning and the end, correct? That she's speaking directly to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That's how I remember it.
That's how I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like something to say where she introduces herself and then, the rest of the movie is like left to us to kind of gather what do we think of her based on what these other people say of her.
Yeah.
And then like at the end, she like tries to like, I guess, defend who she is.
Yeah, there's allusions to paintings and art in the film and in a couple scenes, and that's how I kind of view Nola, and I think someone even mentions it throughout in the course of the film where they compare her to like a painting because different people can look at her and see different things. So it's like this movie's a lot about it's very much about interpretations of people. How one thinks of themselves and then how others think of them. And how that affects you or doesn't affect you.
It was really interesting. One thing I was thinking about with the idea of Nola as a painter, which I had never really noticed before, because there was one line earlier on in the film where she's talking about how her dad was a musician and was trying to teach her to also be a musician. I don't remember the exact line it was, but it was something like it was too much work or too much effort and commitment, which I just thought was interesting, knowing Nola's character, that like the reason she doesn't want to get into music is because it's too much of a commitment, whereas like these works of art she's creating, she can kind of bounce around between different ones. Like we don't really see her just working on one piece of art the whole movie. She's kind of bouncing around, which I think is Nola's whole thing. She doesn't like just settling in. She wants to be over here and then over, you know.
You can't really pin her
so
down.
I don't know. And she's, and also it's interesting because she's not painting, she's pasting things on, which is relatively it's not a really super permanent thing.
Right.
It's so easy to just kind of peel one of those off and switch it and move it around. So she's just, it's just so interesting what she's drawn to as an artist and how her art is never really harped on. You know, they don't really spend any time talking about her as an artist, but we're seeing it the whole time, and we're getting a sense of A, the art she's creating, and B, how she's evolving artistically the whole movie, which I think is really fun because, you know, it's so tough writing artist characters, I think, and not just making it all about their art and what art they're creating the whole time. But I think that in this film they did a really terrific job of actually making her feel like a real artist who's balancing life and the work.
Yeah. And also, like, her being the art itself, because, like, the whole film is her being perceived.
Right.
Just like how we interpret art and how do we see it. And they describe her as a freak. So it's like, what does that mean to whoever is, like... exactly. What does that mean to someone who's watching her, observing her?
But is that a good or a bad thing? You know, depends on the person, I guess. But yeah, I mean, Nola is definitely a very fluid character, I would say. So it's interesting that, her art is kind of like that as well. So that's a nice little, like, juxtaposition there. So we are introduced to Nola, and from there, we're introduced to the other characters in the film, starting with Jamie. And Jeremy mentioned that there's a lot of names going on, sort of, you know, with these characters. So we're going to try to keep them all straight. But Jamie is, how would you describe him? I guess he's, like, the more straight-laced of her suitors.
He's boyfriend material, like classic boyfriend material.
He's sort of bland, I guess, or like dry. Nothing overtly offensive about him, right? Seems like an all right guy.
Yeah. Well, he's kind of possessive, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, he definitely shows himself to be, you know, something that we'll get to that later. But in those early scenes, you don't really know exactly what to make of him. They do show a lot of intimate scenes between them. Early on, and there's these still shots. Actually, I was going to mention those because not only do we have the characters speaking to the camera in these sort of static shots, but we have these. I saw them as kind of like portrait-esque, like tableaus. Composed beautifully, by the way, by Ernest Dickerson, who I happen to share a last name with, but like cinematographer, you know, longtime cinematographer who is. I think one of the best out there, and so they started their collaboration here. And you know, the way he shoots these scenes, these intimate scenes between the characters, I just thought were really beautiful. And there's very little movement from the camera or from the characters, which is sort of like the photographs.
There's candles all over the bed.
Yeah, the candle.
I kept getting.
Fire hazards.
I would not want to move.
Exactly. I was going to mention that there's a lot of candles going on.
No.
But, you know, I think Spike was trying to create a mood, you know, and I think he definitely did that. And with these very static shots, he also mixes in some more kinetic camera work, you know, where the camera's moving around a little bit more. This is definitely something you would see utilized a lot more in subsequent Spike Lee films, notably his breakthrough from 1989, Do the Right Thing. There's a lot of energetic, you know, camera movement, handheld camera, stuff like that. But he does mix some of that in at some points in the film. But a lot of the shots in this film are sort of more static and but I thought it fit the aesthetic of the, you know, photography and whatnot. And I mentioned his longtime cinematographer, Ernest Dickerson. And actually, I was joking with Jeremy that I was going to try to convince Spike to come on the show and, you know, tell him I was related or something, but that didn't go through with that. But
didn't work.
Didn't work. But then we're introduced to Nola's friend, Clorinda, and former roommate, and she gives her opinion on Nola. And so we're hearing from these different perspectives. which gives you more insight into the characters and lets you see them in different lights and learn more about them and the ones speaking about them as well, because the people that are speaking to us, I think we get some personality, traits from them, just the way they're talking to us, the way they're talking about Nola. So again, it's an interesting way, because I see this as a character film, and it's an interesting way to, to show us all the characters, I guess. And also, like, after this, there's a montage, bad pickup lines from various men. And there's a couple choice ones I wrote down, but I just want to rock your world. That was one of them. 10 throbbing inches. Yeah, there was some good ones in there. But that's like just a fun little montage he throws in there. But
that's a kind of cool one too, because it's just so it's so confrontational.
Oh yeah, it's very in your face.
It's fun. It's fun because we're not really in Nola's shoes necessarily. Like we're with her through the movie, but it's everyone talking about her.
Yeah.
But in shots like that, that's us getting to experience what Nola's experiencing. That's
true,
that's
yeah.
getting outside of those opinions of her, and we're getting, and we do have a lot of that. And in a way, it almost to me feels like even in the interviews, like anytime someone is talking to the camera in this movie, it almost feels like, because you're with Nola so much, that it's them talking to Nola.
Yeah.
Because she has this awareness of what everyone is saying of her, and I don't want to say she doesn't care. She does care what everyone thinks, but it's kind of like she understands that it's a period of growth for her, because in the beginning she doesn't totally understand that she just has to do what she wants.
Right.
She's doing what she wants, but she's kind of struggling with it. Mm-hmm. And throughout the film, she kind of learns that she's gotta move with what feels right and what feels comfortable for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like she doesn't know what she wants yet, so she's not sure what she is yet, sort of, But speaking of in your face, then we meet Mars, played by Spike Lee, and I just love his introduction, because he literally crashes into us on his bike, and he's just like screaming when it's just like one of those like great intros. But just a little behind the scenes thing, but because his character Mars is such an interesting name, and apparently he couldn't come up with a name for the character, and he called his grandmother, and she told him that name because that's actually the name of her grandfather. So like his great grandfather name is Mars or something like that. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah, a lot of like personal connections in the film. Obviously, his father's in the film. So, but anyway, so Mars is another man in her life, talking to us about Nola, and again played by Spike Lee. And he would go on to act in I would say a decent amount of his films, but this one stands out to me. And this character became somewhat of he became like an ad spokesman for sneakers, right? Was it Nike? Anyway, so for this movie, he is also with Nola, I guess dating, right? So they're kind of dating the same time as she's dating Jamie, or at least...
Yeah, he's in her rotation.
Yeah. And she's showing him her apartment and her paintings. We also are introduced to another friend who's a lesbian, and she gives like a different perspective, which I thought was interesting. And she comes back a little bit later. So we do get some female, like friends of hers and former roommates and things like that, which is cool, along with the men. And then we have Greer Childs. So he's the third man in Nola's life. And his first line is very telling about him. "I was the best thing that ever happened to Nola Darling." His first line when he pulls up in his car. So, and he claims that he made her who she is. He sculpted her, that she was uncivilized, and he wants to try to get her out of Brooklyn and all this stuff. So you kind of
which is
get who
kind of interesting, because the idea of like made her who she is, but the whole movie is the fact that nobody really knows who Nola is.
Right.
And everyone thinks they know who Nola is, but no one really has any clue. She doesn't even.
She doesn't even really know. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, he's just terrible. I mean, but in a funny way. Like he's just so over the top to me. Like he's doing push-ups and telling Nola like, the minute you get fat, I'm leaving you. And it's like then he wonders why like she orders a salad in the restaurant and stuff like that.
He's the one character I just didn't understand what she saw in him.
Yeah.
Because I get with Jamie, it's that safety, it's that romance, that even though she's not a monogamous person, I think it's very human nature. You just want intimacy in some way. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what she was after with Jamie, with Mars. He's so fun. You know, who doesn't like to laugh and
Yeah.
have a good time? And with was Greer,
Greer,
I
yeah.
just don't get it. I don't know if it's like a piece of herself that feels a bit of validation with him. I don't know, because I mean, I think the thing with Nola is like she's described as this phenomenon, and for me it's like a bit of a catch-22. It's like, okay, it's cool, like there's this woman, she's like owning her sexuality, and then on the other hand it's like, but why is that groundbreaking, you know?
Well, at the time, I guess maybe for I guess independent films at that time, it was something that you didn't see much. Yeah, so it was refreshing.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't really mean it in like the film way,
okay.
like that. I mean it as a character.
Oh,
like,
got you. Okay.
I was watching it, even though I do enjoy the film. It struck me like, this is my I think it was like my second or third time watching it, but it struck me as like, especially in 2020, like now that we've progressed, that this character is pretty much reduced to her sex life. She's basically living the almost exact life of like Mars. Like Mars has other women that's been shown, obviously Greer, and even Jamie, who moved on like very quickly, so I just feel like it's interesting that we're saying like, oh, it's so groundbreaking, but then it's like, is it? And then why is that, So
well, there is certain aspects of the film that, I mean, even Spike Lee admits that he regrets, and we'll get into that a little bit more when I go into a little bit more later in the film. But definitely, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of like both ways a little bit, or having it both ways, sort of. But I think his intentions were good. I think what he was trying to do, showing the different sides of the characters and stuff like that, or I think it was definitely a good idea, and maybe he didn't completely achieve everything he wanted to with it. I think even he would admit that. I mean, it was his first feature film, and so early on in his career, and I think he's learned a lot since then, obviously, script writing and all of that. So, but I think at the end of the day, like this movie, it's very entertaining, very, like I said, character driven, and just kind of like fun, to see these people interact. One of my favorite scenes is when all three men, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but she I think it's Thanksgiving, she brings all three men together and they have dinner together, and I think she says like, you're all going to meet eventually anyway, and I just love those interactions between all the characters there. So to me, that's kind of what the movie, it doesn't always handle all the material maybe the best, but I think it's just like a very entertaining film, and some good ideas going on.
What would we call this? It's not a love triangle. It's kind of like a love square, or I don't know, with four people.
Yeah, I guess
it's if Jada Pinkett Smith said it, an entanglement.
Okay,
entanglement.
Yeah,
that fits. Yeah, definitely. But before that scene, there is a scene I did want to mention where, for her birthday, Jamie wants to take her out for a picnic, and this scene stands out, I think, compared to all the other ones. He tells Nola to tap her heels 3 times. There's no place like home. Tells her to repeat that. And we're introduced to our first and only full color sequence of the film. And Jeremy, as you mentioned, it's such a low budget film. I'm sure the reason that they shot in black and white, among other reasons, was because it was cheaper, which makes sense, right? But there is this little kind of, I guess, homage to Wizard of Oz going into color when that film breaks out into color. There's a scene in the park with 2 dancers in front of a large statue in Fort Greene Park, I believe, and they're in front of a big happy birthday banner, and Nola and Jamie are watching them, and it stands out as just a very unique and very cool stylistic scene. But I wanted to get both of your thoughts on why, like, what do you think the reasoning or the meaning behind that sequence was?
Well, it kind of reminded me of something. I guess he wanted to like break reality for a moment, because I think of his other film, Crooklyn, which I think came out sometime in I think 94. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think
that sounds right. 95. Yeah.
But there is Troy, the main character, the little girl. There is not even a scene, I guess like a whole act where she's down south with her aunt, and everything is filmed completely different from the rest of the film. Like everything is stretched out and abstract. And I guess it was like to illustrate that she's in a new environment and she's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's like something, I don't know if he's done that in another film.
Well, maybe not that exactly, but he's very playful. I mean, he's very experimental in his films. So that's one of the things I like about him. So
Yeah, because I'm thinking like I'm not sure if that's like a style thing for him, where it's like he'll take a act or a scene and make it completely different from the rest of the movie.
I remember the first time I watched Crooklyn. As a side note, I thought my television was broken.
Yeah.
Because it's like he which I think is indicative of how bold Spike Lee is as a director.
Yeah.
Because like it's not like for those who haven't seen it, and highly recommend go checking it out. It's not like he gets a little compressed with it. It's like the characters are like their heads are like stretched, which I think is a testament in the same way with this film, that all of a sudden in the middle of a black and white film, going to a color sequence and having that sequence just be a dance number is just so bold and daring.
And to have no dialogue, and the whole film is dialogue pretty much. So it's interesting to have that juxtaposition as well. Just only music, no dialogue, and just the dancers.
Yeah, not only that, but it's interesting, like at the park, this is Fort Greene in the 80s, there's graffiti everywhere, and he's illustrating it as this most beautiful, elegant place. These elegant dancers doing, something that you'd probably see in a theater, just on top of a graffiti like platform. I think it was something to show, like literally showing the color of Brooklyn.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. It also has a kind of, like we said, like a dream-like feel to it.
It does.
It's like that, because a lot of the movie, for a movie that's about love, is kind of lacking real romance. Like, most of the interaction she has with these guys are pretty, I don't want to use the word miserable, but like, they're not easygoing. You know what I mean?
No.
Like we see flashes of kind of real love, or at least real attraction, mostly with Jamie, but like, and I guess some moments with all three of them, but this to me, that scene kind of feels like the one moment of the real film where Nola actually gets to just be in love and like not have to worry about anything more complicated. It's like she's just enjoying, which of course comes back around because later on in the movie we find out that the dancer is the new person that he is hooking up with. So it does come back because I think Nola. I mean, what makes her such a compelling character is that she has the opportunity to make things easier for herself in terms of making things less complicated. Because if she just picked a guy, like a lot of her problems would go away.
Yeah.
But it's not what she wants. She doesn't feel ready to pick, and which I think is kind of cool because that's more reflective of real life. I know I've had plenty of conversations with friends, particularly now, which I think it's been a while since I watched the TV show, but I think they get into online dating a little bit. But I've had plenty of conversations with friends talking about online dating. It's this feeling where there always might be something better, or if they pass up one person and they find out that person was the person they should go with, it's like so tragic. And I think that's kind of the thing with this feeling, with this film, is she isn't sure if any of them are the right person, but she's not sure that they're all the wrong person. So she's kind of waiting and letting themselves slowly reveal their true colors over time.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that she gets that one kind of real moment of love and joy, and it's in color. But that thing wasn't enough for her to just say, all right, I'm going to go with him. Because then right after that, we see her, hooking up with Mars.
We talked about how beautiful that scene is in the park, and I think it is. But another way it could be looked at, I was thinking about this later, because once Jamie kind of reveals more of his character, it's sort of like he's showing this grand gesture, I guess, to try to win her over, to win Nola over. And I don't know, it's just like, it's so over the top. And like you said, Jeremy, he ends up going out with the one dancer too. So there's sort of like an underlying, like, I don't know. There's something about it that's an interesting way to look at it.
I think it kind of unveils a little bit of, like, he's not as sincere as he seems.
Yeah.
I think Jamie and Nola are like pretty much very opposite, polar opposites. She's very carefree, like, I just want to do my own thing, and he's very like, I just want a relationship. But ultimately I think he just wants a relationship. Like, Nola is just a challenge that he's like, trying to achieve, but I think he just wants someone, because to go with the dancer, I was like, oh my god,
I know.
you could pick anybody else.
I forgot about that too.
The dancer that you booked for her birthday.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But I think it kind of shows, all of them, they all have their own motivations and intentions. And I think it's not so much that they just want Nola. I think, Jamie, he just wants a girlfriend, period. And I think Mars, I think he's just impressed with Nola and how grown up she is, because he's kind of like a man-child. And I think with Greer, he just wants her because she looks good on his arm. So I don't even think they're like really chasing her. I think they're just chasing whatever she can give them, or whatever they think that she can give them.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think Mars even specifically wants her. I think Mars is just kind of, pardon my language here, but a little bit of just a fuckboy who's kind of down to, who's kind of just like going, because there's the one scene where like she's like, Mars, it's not happening, and he just picks up the phone and calls a different girl.
Yeah.
And which I love. I love that Spike Lee wrote himself as that character.
Yeah.
Because like I feel like most directors take themselves pretty seriously. So the fact that he's putting this movie together and is saying, there's one role for me, and he doesn't put himself in as the good-looking cool guy. He puts himself in as like the most obnoxious. Like, he's fun. He's
like
hysterical.
the comic relief. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's the comic relief. He's not the cool guy. He's not. He's not coming in like he's not coming in trying to be Martin Scorsese or something. He's like, no, I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna
in a lot of ways
wear the Brooklyn hat and
I think in a lot of ways he's the most like Nola, actually, because like Katie said, like he's very she's very kind of like carefree and not serious, and Mars is definitely like that. So they are very similar, maybe a little too similar, and they both kind of like you said, Jeremy, like they're both kind of maybe just like hooking up, or you don't really know exactly at first. I think Mars does maybe develop more feelings for her as the film progresses, though. There's the famous like baby please, and but Mars, I also like that he's not impressed by Jamie's poetry. He has a great line. He's like ice cream on a summer day, soft. But I think Mars has his own kind of like poetry, the way he speaks. Like a lot of the dialogue in the film like reminds me of that, kind of like poetry almost. So we're also introduced at this point to Nola's therapist. So she gives her account of Nola. And Greer is not a big fan of the therapist, because therapist is essentially telling Nola not to be with him. And
even though he sent her to the therapist.
Yeah.
Even though, I guess.
Calling her a freak and that she needs help for doing exactly what he does.
Right. But she does end up, I think, with more perspective after, I think the psychiatrist or therapist talks about that. But, and then, so that's a funny little, thing with Greer there. And then all three of the men, like I mentioned, are all in the same scene together, the Thanksgiving dinner. And I thought it was one of the most entertaining scenes in the film, just watching all these characters interact in the same room together. At one point, Mars flips a coin to see who would get Nola. Like they're all just like fighting over her essentially at this point, just arguing with each other, going off on each other. Who would be best for Nola? Of course, Nola doesn't really have any say in this. She's kind of just sitting back.
Yeah, it's a very poignant scene, because she has like she's just sitting there like, is anyone gonna ask me?
Yeah.
Or like.
But she seems almost like amused by it. That's the thing. Like it's almost like she expected this to happen when she got all three of them together.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's weird. Like I feel like in her mind she would have liked it if they got together and actually worked something out and had some kind of real conversations. Yeah. But she had to know on some level that there was no way she was putting these three personalities together in a room and anything productive was ever going to come out of it. But
right.
I don't know. But I think one thing is the way that scene is shot is so freaking cool. Yeah. Because you just have like this high angle camera just hanging over them, making them all look small. Mm-hmm. And then Nola is shot mostly in close up through the scene. Yeah. So it just from a filmmaking standpoint, the way that scene is set up, I know we kind of get into the medium shots a little bit as they start arguing a little bit. Yeah. But I love just that high angle 3-shot of them sitting at the table, just looking like they're because basically that shot is saying that they all have their different personalities, but they're all in the same boat. They're all together. Yeah. And Nola is the one who holds all the power. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Katie, what did you think of that scene?
I think it was all for her entertainment, honestly.
That's how I felt, yeah.
Yeah, she knew what she was doing. I mean, I was just like, the audacity.
Yeah.
And, and I think it was just also to let them know, like, I'm not hiding anyone from you,
Right.
and I'm dating multiple people because
Yeah.
I want to, you know?
Yeah, I thought that was refreshing in a way. It wasn't like there's these affairs going on and they were hiding things. It was like everything was just out in the open, sort of, which was it was different. So from this point on, after this dinner, I would say the three men start to kind of push Nola a little bit more, to make a decision, particularly Jamie and Greer. And Nola, we see her helping Mars look for an apartment. And this is when Jamie also tells Nola he's seeing another woman, who is Ava, the dancer, like we mentioned before. And so he just tells her flat out, like, you need to make a decision. I like that he tells her that after he starts seeing the dancer. But I guess, Nola's seeing multiple men, so whatever, So, and then Nola tells Greer, she pretty much sends Greer packing at this point, because I think Greer is trying to get her out of Brooklyn and trying to get her to go away with him for 2 weeks, and she says she doesn't want to do that. And then we have a little scene, which I actually liked a lot, with Jamie and Mars on the bench, and they're just just talking, and I don't know, it's just like a good scene. And I like when the little moment when Mars is leaving, and Jamie just kind of looks at the camera, like looks at us and goes, "This guy." It's like, it's just like, I don't know, breaking the fourth wall or something. I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool. So yeah, Jamie has his likable moments, but I think Mars, like, out of the three, obviously is like the most likable. And then, I mean, to me anyway, but Jamie, and then Nola goes back to, there was her friend, who's a lesbian, and she tries to be intimate with Nola, and Nola asks her to leave. And then we see Nola for the first time really alone, actually, in the film, and somewhat desperate, I guess. She's calling Jamie to come over. He's with the other woman, but he still decides to go over there. And there's another little snapshot montage, Jeremy, of Jamie on the subway as he's heading over there. And so those snapshots are like a returning motif, I guess. And then so he gets the apartment, and Nola tells him that she can change, and that she loves him. And I thought that was pretty powerful, like, dialogue from her, because throughout the film it's almost like she's been changing, and and then she tells him, I can change, because she so desperately, like, wants, even if it's not him, like, she desperately wants something, so bad.
What do both of you think it is that Nola actually wants?
I think she just likes intimacy in any capacity she can get, and I think she gets something from all of them. Like, even with Opal, it's like, wow. And it's so interesting how I guess back then it would have been too much if he went forward with it the way he went forward with it in the Netflix series, where she actually has a relationship with Opal.
Oh, isn't that in the series? Okay.
And if she does,
okay, that's interesting.
But but it's like he kind of teases it. But I feel like even with Opal, like, as much as she's like, oh, I'm not into women, she's like still kind of like suggestively, like, she has some interest. And I think Nola, she likes to be adored, and I think she likes to be wanted. And I think sometimes, like, I think some people, like, they can have attachment issues, and not so much that they want to attach to someone, they want people to be attached to them. And I think sometimes it can give a sense of validation or love or a purpose, and maybe that's what she wants, as carefree and free-spirited as she is. I think she's still, a human, and she got to have it, and that it can be anything. It could be sex, it could be love, affection, attention.
Whatever it is, right.
Yeah.
I was going to say about the, the fact that at a TV show you can explore these things a little bit more, because
more
like,
time.
Yeah, like you mentioned, like, would that relationship with her, with the woman have developed more if there was more time to do that in a film? You know what I mean? Like, you don't really know. Maybe not, but
I remember watching it for the first time. I kept expecting her to end up with Opal.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just waiting for that to happen. It's like, oh, she's just over all these guys, which I don't think would have been as strong of an ending. It is interesting. I was thinking about, we were saying before that Nola is maybe the most like Mars of anybody, but the more I kind of think about it, it seems like she kind of is equally split between the people she's around, and she has little aspects. It's like she craves validation like Greer does. You know, like she
Yes.
wants to be validated. It's like she likes the fun, the promiscuity, like Mars. She likes the commitment and the romance, like Jamie. So it is a thing where she has a little bit of all of them, but none of them totally fill that thing for her, which I think does make her really complicated, is because she's not just after love. She's not just after a good time. You know, she's not just after success. She wants a little bit of all of it, which I think is something in real life that is really complicated for all of us because we're multifaceted.
Right.
Yeah, I think Nola, she almost accepts that she can't get that from one person, and that's probably why she believes like, why stay with one person, because one person can never give me all of it. You know,
it's almost like the title should have been "She's Got to Have It, but she can't." You know what I mean? Like she can try, she can try to have it,
have it all,
but she might not be. She might not be able to get it all.
Yeah.
She's trying to have it. Yeah,
she's trying to have it.
Well, so in that scene when Greer comes back to her in the apartment and she says she loves him, but I don't know. I don't for a second believe it when she says it. But I mean, that's up for interpretation, I guess. But what, because we talked about her wanting just some sort of connection. And so what follows here is a somewhat controversial scene. And so Jamie essentially forces himself on Nola and then throws her down on the ground and he leaves. And I will say it is a bit striking for a film that, for the most part, is fairly lighthearted and playful with a lot of it, and comical in points. But this is like a harsh contrast also to the love scenes that came before as well, like the intimate scenes with the candles and all of that. So do you think this was intentional, on the part of, I don't know, the filmmaker or the way they played it? I mean, how do you feel about, how this plays out here? Either of you?
I definitely do think it's a very controversial scene because it's like, I don't even know what to call it. If it's like a form of rape in a way, because
it's been described that way, and I would say I agree with that. Yeah.
Because the whole consent part of it is pretty gray area, but with that, I think for me personally, the way I think it's open up into interpretation and what the purpose of the scene was. For me, it kind of showed me that Jamie is not like the nice guy. I think Jamie is like the quintessential nice guy who's not really the nice guy.
Yeah. Something underneath.
He goes to the dancer right after he couldn't get with Nola, and then he's mad that she wouldn't commit, so he forces himself and kind of almost tries to shame her for what he engages with her, like sex.
After
he
she
shames
gives
her
herself
for
over to him, essentially, like telling her, telling him that she loves him and everything like that.
Exactly, and I think he has this anger, and he tries to use something that was once passionate between them as something as violence against her, and it kind of shows like what his intentions were the whole time, or how he really feels about her, and it's all about like possessiveness.
Yeah, you see everything in a different light once this scene happens, I feel like. But
it seems like he really wants what he really wants. If we're going back to kind of this character desires, because I think if I were to pick a theme personally for this movie and try to parse it down to one word, it would probably be want. It's all about desire, and I think what he really wants is control. It's like even like the conversation, which I thought was very telling, where Mars is saying, "Oh, she stands me up all the time. You never know with her. She stood me up for a Knicks playoff game and I missed 2 quarters." And Jamie's like, "She's never stood me up." Like, you kind of get the feeling that like she has stood him up. He just didn't take it. Yeah. Like, when she doesn't show up, he's getting on the phone calling her 30 times until she shows up, and we don't necessarily see it. But like, you kind of get the sense that he wants to be in charge of what Nola is doing. Which is why I think, like, even when she's coming to him saying, "I love you," like, that's on her terms. She's finally come to that conclusion. And he's like, "I'm angry," and obviously have this insane overreaction. But I think the reason he's presented as so angry there is because it's no longer on his terms. The minute she's the one making that decision about their relationship, he can't handle that.
He's trying to take that power back. And you mentioned reactions. I think the reason, well, I think like my thoughts on why this scene is so controversial is, I'm sure there's lots of different reasons, but one of the reasons I think is because it's more, it's not really what's happening, because I think narratively it does make sense, but it's more the reaction or the non-reaction that Nola has to it. These are just my thoughts on it, but I think she makes a comment about it to him afterwards, but to Jamie, but she never really fully holds him accountable or seems to be affected by it that much. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but to me, I think that's why, I think it's more like her reaction to it, or the way it's handled in that regard. Why it's, and Spike Lee, as I mentioned, you know, in later interviews, he would say that he regretted including that scene. And he said, if I was able to have any do-overs, that would be it. It was just totally stupid. I was immature. It made light of rape, and that's the one thing I would take back. I was immature, and I hate that. I did not view rape as the vile act that it is. So, you know, so there's different things. I mean, part of it's he was young, filmmaker, first film. But again, I think narratively, like I do understand why that scene is there. So I think it's like more maybe the reaction to it, like afterwards. But I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I think it's just two ways for me, because creatively, I understand him regretting that, and because I think as a creative or a creator, you don't want to send out any negative messaging, but at the same time, for me, I also think that art needs to reflect how the world is, and there are there are men who do have control issues like that, and who, you know, like the idea of like someone like Nola who is kind of in charge of her own sexuality, that can be a threat to you know, the sexist values that we have in this world, you know, the ideologies of a woman should be pure and not. So I even though it was very controversial, it's actually very realistic. So me personally, I don't have a problem when things are like are reflective of the world and how people actually are. But I totally get why he feels the way he feels.
Well, and I think, Mark, like you're saying, it might also just in the reason it feels so shocking, like you said, is maybe not the act itself, but it's kind of the lack of the response and the reaction. Where it's like we don't really see, because that would be for Nola a really traumatic thing to deal with, and we never really see her process that trauma and deal with it. So I think that's the thing that makes it so shocking. I think if we have that scene and then we get to see Nola like go through some shit and kind of the distrust and the pain that it causes her, it might not feel so brutal. But because we're kind of just left with it, and then it kind of just goes back to normal Nola. Which is also, you know, realistic in terms of her putting up a front. Like if it was a film that was a really kind of third person film where we were never in her mind in the way we are, it might not have been so severe either. But because it's a mind where we have these shots where we're getting Nola's POV throughout the film and we're really in her shoes, we kind of expect to see the ramifications when she experiences something like that.
True.
Kadia, is there anything in a Netflix show that hits on this at all? Or
I haven't watched the first season. I watched the first episode of the first season today. But I kind of forgot. But I do know that in the first episode, instead of that part where the guys are like saying, "Hey, ma," you know, there is a guy that actually does assault her, like verbally, and like grabs her up, you know, like you bitch. I didn't want to, you know, F you anyway, because she rejected him. So in a way, I think throughout the show, it kind of shows the violence that can happen against women when it comes to like intimacy and sex and all that. And there are consequences to it. So there is reaction. So
it's handled a little differently. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, there is consequence.
Okay. So this is basically the end of the film at this point. I mean, she says bye to, she said bye to Greer. She says bye to Mars. You know, she kind of, she's with Jamie, I guess, a little bit at the end, but not really with him. She tells him she needs to be celibate right now. That's what she tells him. But I think
she needs a break.
She needs a break. Yeah. So from all these men, she just needs a break. And she does tell him again that she loves him, kisses him, walks away. And I think, and I think maybe that's what made me notice, like, there is something off about it, but but anyway, So Jamie calls her back, and she ends up going back to him because she tells us at the celibacy didn't last long. Because one last time, there's that last scene where it's just Nola again, and she's alone speaking to us, speaking to the camera, the audience, whatever you want to call it. And there you have it. And one of her last lines, or I think it's the last line, she says that they might know parts of me. And then she goes and lays down the bed with the many candles, the fire hazard. And that, and I think that's, they know parts of her exactly. But at the end of the film, I mean, do the two of you feel like she knows herself better? Do you think she finally is starting to know who Nola Darling is?
I think she knows who she is. I mean, even when she reflects back on, when she tells us that she's no longer with Jamie, she's like, that was a moment of weakness. Right. I think she always kind of knew who she was, and that she was always a person that's just discovering life. And sometimes knowing who you are is also just knowing that I'm figuring it out. Like being certain in that. And I think with her, she just kind of, at the end, she just owns it. Like, I'm just not a monogamous person, and I can't fit what other people want me to be.
Right.
She's cool with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's interesting too that we end with her, and throughout the film, that the candles are such a motif, which we hit on a little bit just as like a set design element. Yeah. But like in terms of meaning, I think it's interesting because the nature of a candle is kind of this ephemeral thing where it's burning really hot and bright, but you only have a certain amount of time, and then it goes down.
Temporary.
And we see her, her scraping off the wax and replacing the candles. So it is kind of a thing where it's like Nola's moving through phases, but everything she's doing is kind of impermanent. Because she's so young, she's, I mean, I don't know exactly how old Nola is supposed to be. I don't remember if they say, but she's so young, and even that scene at the end, like like she's saying, like the celibacy didn't last long. It doesn't explicitly say, I don't think, that it was Jamie. So like it easily could be her saying, "Oh, it didn't." It could be someone else entirely, for all we know.
You're right. Yeah, that's true.
I think that's what's kind of cool about Nola as a character, and with this film, is that it doesn't feel like it's this self-contained thing where it wraps up and it's neat, but it also doesn't feel like it's so abstract that you don't get it. It's kind of like we saw, to get a little metaphorical here, like we saw a candle of Nola's life. It burned down, and then she's gonna stick another candle on and light it, and she's gonna have the next phase.
Right. Sort of like the paintings. It's like an ever-changing portrait, sort of. So that's the end of the film, and it's the end credits are very fun. It's all the actors saying their names to the camera while holding the slate, which is kind of like in line with how the rest of the film was, with everyone talking to the camera and whatnot. So I thought it was like a fun little, and it definitely feels like a close-knit crew and like just a low-budget, like fun independent film to work on. I could be wrong, but that's the impression I got. And so I like that little tag at the end, and I did want to talk about the acting a little bit, because the characters are such a huge part of this. Tracy Camilla Johns, I'm sorry. She was the one who played Nola. It seems that she took a break from acting around 1991, but she returned as Mother Darling in Spike Lee's 2012 film Red Hook Summer. And she has a cameo apparently in the Netflix show She's Gotta Have It as Nola, which I haven't seen it, so I don't know is she actually playing herself, or is that just like a
no? She played like a some sort of.
Do you remember that at all?
Like an art buyer.
Yeah, I think no, because in the TV series,
that's interesting.
It's still about Nola. It's still about Nola in the TV series, just set in 2017. So, maybe there's two parallel Nolas that exist, one in 1986 and one in 2017.
There you go. But there's a little nod there. So but she didn't do too much else. But I thought she was really good in this film, and I think it was either her first film or very early on in her career. And I just thought like she like embodied that character so well, and she had that kind of like ever-changing fluidity to her that I thought was essential for the character. So, but how did you feel about it?
Oh, I liked her. She also looks like Kelly Rowland to me.
She does, a little bit.
Yeah, exactly like Kelly Rowland. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But all around, I mean, even Spike Lee I think is great in this, and I think
he's an underrated actor.
I think he's good. He's really good.
Yeah.
So I think it's the acting and the dialogue. I mean, this film's all about like he's very funny in this. I think the dialogue in this film is great, and as you mentioned, Jeremy, very low budget independent film. 12 days they filmed it in during the summer of 1985 on a budget of $175,000. So it was filmed entirely on location, no sets or anything like that. And Spike Lee had a screening at NYU where he had to ask for some more, more money to finish the film, pretty much. So he, it was somewhat of a struggle, I'm sure, to make this film. But once it came out, it definitely put him on the map. And I would say Do the Right Thing was probably the one that really broke him through to the mainstream. But this one, we're talking about 80s independent films, and I thought we couldn't leave this one out because it was so important for a lot of reasons. Because, and also because the budget was so tight, there was no retakes. So, things like that, like we talked about with some of these other films, just like, it's sort of like guerrilla filmmaking. It's like, depending on how much money you have, these shoots can be really tough. But I think at the end of it, like for a first film, we've talked about a couple premiere films from directors, and I think this was a very strong first effort from Spike Lee. And I'm a big fan of Spike Lee. I've seen not all his movies, but I've definitely. It's like I can't watch just one. Like I just want to go watch all his movies now. But I don't know. How do you? What's your relationship with Spike Lee films? How do you both feel about him as a director or writer?
I love him.
Yeah.
I think my first Spike Lee film I ever saw was the Crooklyn film, and it was the first time I ever saw myself on screen. I'd never seen a story about a little black girl. Yeah. And just she's not in pain. Right. It's like she's just living and human. So yeah, I love him for that. And just the way he tells a story, it's just about different relationships and with family and friends, and every character has a world of their own, which I appreciate. So no one feels like a sideline character.
Definitely.
And I'm a huge Spike fan as well. I just think everything he does. And obviously now we know the Spike Lee style, so it's probably which artists are always evolving, and but especially early on for him, what he just I think infused 80s and 90s filmmaking. It was just such a lifeline because his films were just so full of this energy and bold experimentation, but not in a way that felt cheap or hokey. Like it felt like he was experimenting because he came from Brooklyn, and he was infusing his films with this energy of being someone who's from a city, and they all felt everything he does feels so true to who he is as a filmmaker. So yeah, he's definitely a favorite of mine as well.
Definitely, and apparently Martin Scorsese taught him film directing at NYU, and you can see there's a through line there. I feel like you mentioned the word energy. When I think of Spike Lee films, I think of energy. They just have so much energy to them, and they're very kinetic and very much like Martin Scorsese film, just constantly moving around. And yeah, I mean, there's a vibrancy to it. And this was his start, and thought it was a very strong start, and great film.
Also, one thing to note too, I know you just mentioned NYU. Spike Lee is a professor at NYU.
Yeah,
I think he actually might be the head of the program at this point. Okay. But just a cool thing is we come across all different kinds of filmmakers, and some are self-taught. And some are film school people, and Spike Lee is one of the film school, diehard film school students, and educators, which I just think is cool because it's nice variety.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and there is a Netflix show. We mentioned it a bunch of times.
Yeah,
but
a bunch of times.
It came out in 2017, apparently. I've not seen it, but Spike Lee is involved. He's a producer, I believe, on the show, and I think it may be canceled because when I was looking it up, I saw something, an article about that. So I think Spike Lee is shopping it around currently. So, but I think
is he? Cool.
Couple seasons. That's what I read. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so she's got to have it. And Kadia, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And
thank you so much for having me.
Back.
This was so fun. Yeah, I would love to. This was so
great.
great.
More members to the cult, so.
I've always wanted to join a cult, so thanks.
There you go.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
You're in. Just don't drink the Kool-Aid. All right, so next time on the show, we will be staying in the same year, actually, 1986. We're going to talk about River's Edge, Another great 80s independent film. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook if you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, like Kadia has, and be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side.